I am well. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So are you enjoying the class?
It's amazing. It's amazing. I love it.
I'm so
Love
glad.
it. And it also gets it's funny because I'll like have someone, come into our department and they start saying, oh, this and that and this and that, and all these like light bulbs are going off. And then sometimes I'll go, oh God, I don't know what to tell you. But and I have a woman who is interested in working with me, who I've known for a few years now through the store. And I just had a conversation with her by phone yesterday, and she's just off the charts. And all those things that we talk about where I said, okay, I want to know about like your foods and this and that. And she's like, I love watermelon. I eat watermelon as soon as I get up, and I really just almost only eat watermelon. I'm like, she loves watermelon. Okay. And she kratom, alcohol. It's just like all over the map. So deciding whether she really wants to do this or not. We're going to talk some more. Yeah.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. And your car.
Yeah, my Tom the Tahoe.
Nice, I like it. Deborah, welcome.
Good morning. I still have to get to the market, so I just wanted to jump on and say hello and hear some good words, because one of the things I had learned when my daughter acquired alopecia was in researching other autoimmune diseases, including celiac, which you've talked about many times. There is a preponderance of evidence that that disease manifests itself at times of pregnancy, high stress, surgery, menopause. And you've talked about how, during our cycles affect our cravings. So I just, I think women know more than anyone else the impact of hormones on our bodies. And I have heard that hormones, if our liver doesn't detox, they used hormones cycle. So it's really important to make sure our health is, we have a healthy liver if we want to have healthy hormones.
Absolutely. And this is something that a lot of people don't think about. And we addressed in our advanced class. In our, I'm running 2 advanced classes right now. So, and we just did reproductive hormones in the advanced class that's been going for a while. So let's wait a couple more minutes before I get into the lecture part of this, just to see if anybody else shows up. But are there any particular questions or other stories that anybody would like to share? Success stories, cases, before we jump into the meat?
Hi, Christina.
Hi,
Sorry
Laura.
I'm late. The internet's been crazy today. I don't know what's going on. So I don't even know if you know this, Christina, but I'm 45 years old. I went into polycystic endocrine failure at age 36. So I've been in menopause for 9 years.
Right.
So hormones, yes. So hormones have been a real challenge because I get migraines and I've tried to supplement with all types of different hormones, and my body just won't let me really supplement with very much, especially not estrogen. So I'm very interested in this topic. I don't know if it was genetic or if it was maybe my binge drinking back in my 20s and 30s that caused this, but yes, hormones are a big issue in my life. So I'd love to learn as much as I can.
Well, a question, Laura. When was the last time you did a full sort of uh, lab panel at the doctors that included liver enzymes?
My liver enzymes are actually okay right now. Honestly, I'd have to go back and look at my medical charts. Because I haven't had, because I've been self-employed for a long time, health insurance and being able to afford it is an issue, right?
Sure.
So I have to pay out of pocket like $500 when I go get labs drawn, right? So
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I'd have to go back and look, but my liver has been okay for a while, for at least the last 3 years. But back then, I don't know. I can't remember how much they checked. So
Yeah, Deborah.
In Dr. Perlmutter's book, Brain, he mentions celiac, or he mentions wheat as being a trigger for hormones, and has had patients lose their migraines when they get off of it. And I also have another friend who experienced that. So you're nodding. So I guess you've done that.
I've gone gluten-free for about the past year. I've gotten real strict on it. And so it's made a big difference in a lot of other aspects of my health, and my migraines have definitely gotten better. I don't know if I can exactly attribute it to the gluten-free or not, but I know estrogen definitely makes it worse if I supplement with estrogen.
So one of the things that I came across was the fact that there's now spraying wheat, even though it's not a genetically modified crop, they're spraying it with glyphosate to kill the bluegrass or improve the yield. So a food that many people are eating, by gobs and bunches, maybe that unintended extra pesticide, which we now know disrupts our liver, which could be, our gut, which could in fact be, just not good for our brain as well.
Right. Yes, I agree. And my memory I've had memory problems, but I also had alcohol withdrawal seizures too a while ago whenever I was getting off of alcohol. So, but yeah, my memory has been struggled too because of hormones. That's one of the things. So, but yes, I agree with the wheat and glycophosphate for sure.
Hi, this is Kathy. I have just a small thing to add. Part of my story, which got me into the whole functional medicine and nutrition world, was stage 4 adrenal fatigue, and my cortisol was pretty much flatlined. And coupled with that, I was I was 45 at the time. I'm 52 now. So I was, I guess I could have been perimenopausal, but I had no progesterone either. And I know that there's been talk of back in that time, and now they're even looking at adrenal fatigue possibly as being more mitochondrial dysfunction. But anyways, I supplemented. I did a lot of work with adrenal healing, with adrenal rebuilding, and but also supplemented with bioidentical progesterone, and made a big difference in my recovery. And also at the time went gluten, sugar, dairy, corn, soy, nut free, did all the things. But in my journey since doing that, I also had candida. And then most recently last year, I also tested again. And I don't know if I still had candida, like if it had gone away during that time and then it grew back again as I kind of went off that protocol after a year or so when I was healed and I went back to drinking. I didn't drink during that year. I was on some medication that I knew I shouldn't drink on. I was able not to drink on it because one of them was Xanax, and it took my craving away. And I didn't really realize that at the time. So I was like, oh, I guess drinking isn't really a problem for me because I didn't miss it during that time, but I was taking plenty of Xanax for my anxiety, which was through the roof when you have no cortisol and you have no progesterone. That creates a boatload of anxiety, which I had at baseline anyways, which was really from all my drinking that I did over the years. But anyways, just to say that over time, it's been a journey as far as continuing to dig for the root cause. And once I felt like I got one thing under control, there were still other symptoms which kept me looking. And then, so the candida was still there. And then someone told me with candida, look for mold. And sure enough, there's a mold infection, which I am now beginning a detox. I did get blood work back with certain other mold markers, which are very, very high for one of them. And so yeah, it continues to be a journey. It's not just one thing, you know, it's our nutrition, our lifestyle, our sleep habits. Every single one of them affects our hormones, and it's just a matter of whacking away at it and honing it in and getting it all streamlined and worked out. So it's definitely a journey, and just keep sticking to digging for information and learning. That's all I got.
Kathy, I laughed whenever you said what you had to eliminate. What do you eat now? Just air or
Oh
what?
no, that was
I'm
just
kidding.
for the time. No, I do pretty much do all organic as much as I can, and I am still pretty much gluten, sugar, and dairy for the most part, especially while I'm doing this detox. And now that I have no taste or smell, it's so much easier to not get on the pizza and ice cream bandwagon, which is really I mean, I will crave that just like I crave a glass of wine. If I were to have a glass of wine, it probably, you know, it runs in the same track. So, but I am pretty much gluten, sugar, dairy free. I never really ate much soy anyways. I do eat nuts, but I don't eat peanut butter. I don't eat peanuts too much. I mean, I have, if they're out at a party or something, I might have a handful, but, well, no, I take that back. There's been times when I will eat, because my daughter eats peanut butter sandwiches, so I'll still eat it off the spoon, but I eat fruits, all fruits, except for pineapple. I have a sensitivity. Vegetables, all meats, fish. I don't eat eggs. They are a high sensitivity for me. So I eat a lot of things, legumes, rice and quinoa. They're the only grains I eat, and millet.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Kathy. Let's do our regular introductions. One sentence, please. Keep it short.
Hi, Deborah Filla from Kansas City. My business is Inside Out, helping people build health from the inside out.
Elena.
Hi, Elena, Oakland, California, nutrition educator, Bowman College, 2007, 13-year veteran at a local woman-owned health food store in the wellness department.
Welcome. Kathy.
Kathy Rose from Nashville, Tennessee, physical therapist and functional nutrition educator, mind body eating coach, working holistic soberista, working with people in early recovery or in recovery, healing their bodies from chronic illness.
Laura.
Laura Lee, Oklahoma City. I am the owner of Infinity Wellness and Lifestyle Solutions. So I do everything from teaching yoga, meditation, and obviously adding recovery nutrition to that. And I'm also in the process of starting the Doc Clark Foundation, a nonprofit organization to help veterans with PTSD and addiction, because my brother committed suicide in January. So I have a passion for that.
Kathy, where are you from again?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. Jeff.
Jeff Jones, I'm in Colorado. I'm a licensed professional counselor, addiction counselor, family coach.
Welcome.
And I'm in Christina's level 2 class right now.
Yes.
So I'm always open to learning.
The one that's doing hormone, that's just finished hormones. Okay, Sherry.
Hi, good morning. Sherry Baker, currently live in Maryland, licensed mental health counselor actually in the state of Massachusetts, certified holistic health coach, mind, body, mental health, passion for all things nutrition and self-care, a little over 2 years off of psych meds myself, still taking a little snip of Klonopin once in a while, but working on the aminos instead, and glad to be here. Thanks.
Glad to have you here. Well, welcome everybody. If somebody would tell me what's the most important thing about hormones you would like to know, because there's so much. And I could give an overview, or I could do a deeper dive into some aspect of it.
I'd like to know how often to test them and by which mechanism.
Okay. That's the question with no easy answer. All right. So today we're going to talk about reproductive hormones because they impact our mental health and therefore our relationship with mood altering and addictive substances tremendously. And it's a fairly complex topic because the endocrine system in our body, which is a communication and glandular process in the body, every piece of it impacts every piece else. So as we know anyway, you can't ever separate one organ system from the rest of the body. Everything is interconnected. Everything talks to everything else. And like a mobile, if you impact one piece of it, either positively or negatively, it's going to impact all the rest of it. And the reproductive hormone system is no different, because as part of the endocrine system, it is impacted by the health of the brain, the thalamus and the hypothalamus sending signals to the pituitary, which then sends signals to the adrenals and our reproductive glands, whether it be the testes in men or the ovaries in women. But it is also, they are tremendously impacted by the health of the adrenal glands and the health of the liver. And we'll be talking quite a bit more about the liver, but they're also impacted by the health of the thyroid gland. And as with everything, if we've had a traumatic brain injury, and especially more than one very serious ones, that can be impacting the communication ability of the hypothalamus and the pituitary to get to the rest of the body. We forget this. That's not something I want everybody to, run out and immediately be jumping on. However, if you've tried everything and nothing has worked, these TBIs can be hidden, but can still be impacting us because of lack of connection in the brain. And there's some things we can do about that. So that's just a point I wanted to mention because we tend to forget that. As we all know, I hope we all know, all of our adrenal hormones and our reproductive hormones are a subset, are made out of one nutrient and one nutrient only. And what is that nutrient, somebody? Anyone? What's the one nutrient that all of our adrenal hormones and our reproductive hormones are made out of?
Cholesterol.
Cholesterol. Good for you, Kathy.
Bing, 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 bing.
And if you guys have been, paying attention to the crossword puzzles that I've started sending out, that's one of the questions there. So everything starts with cholesterol. Cholesterol then requires sufficient ATP and enzyme CoA and some other things to then convert it down a series of hormone pathways, which include DHEA. And it's supposed to be, I don't know, it's supposed to be evenly split, but I think about it as being relatively evenly split between going down the reproductive hormone creating pathways, your testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, versus going down your cortisol pathways. However, when we're under a lot of stress and when we've been running hot for a long time and our cortisol is running hot for a long time, there is something called either the cortisol or the pregnenolone steal, where some of the raw material, rather than going down DHEA and making your reproductive hormones, actually turns into cortisol. And so the very first thing we want to be thinking about when we have issues with hormone either deficiency or instability is there enough raw material going down the production pathway, or is it getting stolen by cortisol? And so we want to look at stress. So many things go back to stress. And so if we have a full-blown adrenal dysfunction, that's definitely going to impact our reproductive hormones. But even just ongoing stress that we're not managing well, or the bumps in our, stress life, can throw things off. And so keeping an eye on our own stress management skill set, what are we actually doing? Because we tend, we're so used to being stressed out that we don't always notice it.
Mhm.
We don't always notice that we've moved back into a stress reaction. And so learning how to pay attention to your body, learning how to notice your breathing, learning how to notice your muscular structure, right? Are your, shoulders hanging up by your ears again? Okay. Are you feeling a clenching in your tummy? Are you just feeling this sense of right? Where just everything is tighter. And then learning how to notice that. So one of my most favorite exercises, and I started doing it decades ago, and it's a deceptively simple exercise, is a couple of times a day. Welcome, Kim. A couple of times a day, I recommend that people stop and notice. Do a body scan. Start from the top of your head. Notice what's happening sensation-wise inside your head. Notice your thoughts. Notice any tension that's happening in your face, in your jaws, right? Relax it. Notice what's happening in your neck and your shoulders. Breathe it out. Notice what's happening in your heart. Are you holding on to painful emotions? Are you feeling super protective? Are you wanting to sort of, curl inward to protect your heart and you're feeling vulnerable? Take a breath, put your arm around your, young parts and connect spiritually so that you feel a little more protected, a little safer, a little more grounded from your heart. Going further down, notice what's happening in your tummy. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you actually need to go to the bathroom and you've been ignoring it, right? Basic self-care. Some of us don't want to take the time to pee. And right? And we need to. This is part of self-care. And by the way, going to the bathroom is a really good time to do this little exercise. Okay, you can anchor it to it. Notice what's happening in your skeleton and your muscular structure, right? You just need to relax your whole entire body, or you're sort of feeling a little out of alignment. You need to just kind of sit up or stand up and just sort of shake yourself so that, you know, everything can kind of fall back into place again. You need to stand up and feel your feet on the ground so that you're grounded again. You need to notice, you know, how your spinal column is moving into your, you know, pelvic area and your sits bones. And, you know, are you sitting up straight? Is your bottom grounded in your chair? What's your posture like? Right? And doing this can take less than a minute. Doesn't take very long, but you're coming back home. And this coming back home allows us to be less lonely inside because we're in connection with ourselves. It can be then we're relating to the outer world from a more grounded place. And then we're noticing if we need support. Do we need to take an amino acid or 2 or 3? Do we need to eat? Do we need to rest? Do we need to stop what we're doing and go out in the garden and dig some holes for bulbs, which I've been making time for this last week, right? I literally get up, you know, I finish a task, I do this, I breathe, and I say, what do I want to do right now? Ooh, I want to go plant some bulbs, okay? No, maybe not for very long, maybe 10, 20 minutes. Or just sit outside with a cup of tea and, you know, because it's still warm enough, not today, but it's been warm enough. And then come back in refreshed and get back to work. This is the bottom line. Because unless we're doing that regularly, everything else is going to start more and more and more getting out of whack, you know, like this domino thing. And so when we're trying to start writing each domino, then we need to, we do it by coming back home. Any questions or comments about that or stories?
Well, now you're making me cry, Christina. Good grief. Because that's exactly what I had to learn the hard way. Being a single mom, raising 2 kids, trying to heal the world. And that's always been my personality, a highly sensitive, want to make everything perfect person. And I had to learn that. And that's how I became a yoga teacher. I did Kundalini yoga for the first time and went, whoa, I don't know what this is, but I need this in my life. So it is about stopping and checking in with yourself and breathing. So thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Elena.
It's interesting the exact phrase you used, because for, I don't know, weeks now, almost every morning I've been YouTubing Thich Nhat Hanh videos, the Vietnamese, but he's so amazing. Oh God. And he has this meditation where it's breathing in, I have arrived. Breathing out, I am home. Breathing in, I am home. Breathing out, I smile.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
This is Deborah, and I switched to a phone, but I tell you what, I started Transcendental Meditation when I was just joining IBM in 1981, and I'll tell you what a lifesaver that is. And, you know, I know it and still try to do it twice a day. Lifesaver.
Yeah. And you see, some of us need to do the big things like the yoga or the meditation. My ADD and my body don't let me do these big things. Probably be good for me if I did. But anyway, so I do the 2-minute thing 5 times a day. Right? And over time, I noticed that I now do it automatically. That I now, because, you know, at first I had to like, you know, pay attention to it. Now whenever I'm getting out of whack, I like notice it. It's like this little, you know, ding goes off in my brain. It's like, oh, you're getting out of whack. Stop, breathe, center, ground. And just doing that, you know, if you're one of those who have difficulty doing, you know, some of the other practices, just doing that by itself adds up. It's cumulative over time, and it's beautiful. Okay. So we always want to come back to adrenal health and be supporting the adrenals, whether we need to do it with good nutrients like, you know, pantothenic acid or, you know, vitamin C, or adaptogens, whether they're energizing or calming. We want to do that just to help them function better. And so that they're not so responsible for coming up with all this cortisol. Now, if we look at the reproductive system itself, there is the creation of the reproductive hormones. There's the balancing of them among others. And then there's the breaking down and getting rid of them. And again, we think a lot about, am I making enough? And are they in balance with each other? But very rarely do we think about, am I getting rid of the old guys? Am I recycling them? Am I breaking them down? Or are they recycling through my body as toxins? And this is especially true of estrogen. Estrogen in particularly can become very toxic. There are a variety of forms of estrogen, including what's called xenoestrogens, which come from plastics, phthalates, pesticides, and other hormone disruptors in our environment. And these xenoestrogens are particularly toxic because our body doesn't know how to break them down. And they can do some nasty things. They can get into estrogen receptor sites and kind of throw everything out of balance. But they can also kind of clog up the works in the liver. Because of course, the more the liver has to detoxify, the less it's able to detoxify. So we'll come back around to estrogen, but I want to land on the liver for a little bit. It's necessary to keep all of our detoxification pathways open whenever we're working on hormone health. And one of the ways to do that is to be paying attention to the toxins in our environment. Now, I do understand that I'm preaching to the choir here, but we do tend to forget these things. And sometimes we forget to mention them, forget to mention them to my clients, that living green actually matters. And it matters to everything. And one of the things it matters to is our hormone health, because we want to take the load off the liver. So what are some of the things that stresses out the liver? Well, anything it has to detoxify. So alcohol, 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 and alcohol. Okay. Even a tiny bit of alcohol, you know, those of us who, you know, don't have a problem with alcohol can still have a problem with alcohol because it may be more than our liver can manage. And then, you know, anything else that we're exposing our, you know, poor overworked livers to. Now, there are some nutrients that can support liver function. We know the glutathione is one of the primary detoxifying agents in the liver. So we can actually bring in glutathione, which is the end stage, or we can start with something like N-acetylcysteine, curcumin, which supports N-acetylcysteine and therefore glutathione. There's milk thistle that can support the liver. And, you know, there's, for instance, a liver care formula by Himalaya, which is one of the things I like. Elena likes that one too. So if you're feeling like your liver is under stress, you want to bring in some of this liver support. One of the things that a lot of people either don't know or forget is that one of the ways that the liver gets rid of its toxins is through combining them, attaching them to cholesterol. So is one of the other reasons we need, I'll get you in a minute, Sherry. One of the other reasons why we need adequate cholesterol is because the liver binds toxins to the cholesterol and makes bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder and then released into the duodenum, the small intestine, when we eat, and it emulsifies fats. But what we want it to do is also go down and be, it is part of what makes our feces brown. And so whenever we have a bowel movement, we are helping the liver detoxify because we're actually removing these toxins from the body rather than having them hang out in the intestines and being reabsorbed and being recycled. Poor liver having to do the same thing over and over and over and over again because it never actually got washed out of the body. This is where making sure that you're having, you know, at least daily bowel movements is crucial. There are herbs and nutrients that can support bile function. These include all of your bitter herbs, includes coffee. Okay, we don't want to overdo coffee, but coffee has some health benefits. And part of it is that it's a bitter, and bitters help with liver function, gallbladder function, and also help produce all of our digestive enzymes from saliva to hydrochloric acid to all the way down. So your bitter lettuces, your bitter herbs, eating arugula. Now, bitter is not my favorite flavor. Some people really like it. I don't particularly, but I do like coffee, so that works. Dandelion root tea. I also like dandelion root tea. Dandelion leaves are bitter. So making sure that you have some of this bitter with every meal helps. These are just little changes we can make, we can bring in, just stick in the back of your head. Like, oh, have I had any, you know, bitter food today? And, you know, get creative around it. There's also a lovely product by Gaia Herbs called Sweetish Bitters, where they put it in a glycerin foundation, and it actually tastes good. You can squirt it under your tongue. You can mix it in cold water. You can mix it in hot water, kind of make it tea. I like it. And I'll take it actually if I've overeaten and have sort of digestive congestion. I don't do it very often, but every once in a while I do. And then it's, where are my Swedish bitters? Sweetish, because I don't like the Swedish bitters, which it's a play on words for, because they just don't taste good. But the Gaia formulation does, and can be really helpful if you're having sluggish digestion, to just do a little bit of this before every meal. But what it's doing is it's helping promote bile flow. The other nutrients we need for bile is taurine, amino acid that's a calmer, but oddly enough, it is also part of bile. And some naturopaths will give a couple of thousand milligrams, a couple of grams of taurine a day to help support bile function. And then choline, phosphatidylcholine is a way of doing it, and you can get that in lecithin, or you can take it straight, or you can get it in some of your fatty foods. A lot of vegetarians are deficient in choline. And so if you have, or I shouldn't say vegetarians because it's found in egg yolks, vegans, a lot of vegans are deficient in choline. And so to find a way for them to supplement with it is valuable, because choline is needed for bile production and bile flow. If you've lost your gallbladder because things weren't working right, then you absolutely need to be supplementing with one of the products on the market to support both. I don't want to say bile production, but see, the bile is made in the liver, it's stored in the gallbladder, and then it's squirted out at the time of the meals. So if you don't have a gallbladder, the liver is trickling bile into the small intestine throughout the day. The problem with that is that it is not sufficient to help you digest your fats. So yes, you may be detoxifying adequately, but you're not, it's not helping with fat emulsification. And that this is a different lecture, a different situation, but I just wanted to mention it. So there are some good products on the market for that. Okay. So when you have hormone imbalances, you need to make sure that the liver is working well, that you're having daily bowel movements, and that your bile is functioning properly. Because this will help get rid of your xenoestrogens. Now, estrogen buildup, called estrogen dominance, is an issue for men as well as women. So when I talk about reproductive health, I'm not just talking about us girls. I'm also talking about the guys. Hi, Jeff. Because estrogen dominance can become an issue for men. One of the mistakes that a lot of GPs make when they test a man's testosterone is they just look at total testosterone, and they don't look at whether it is converting adequately to what's called free testosterone. Well, it's the free testosterone that gets into the cells and makes everything and everybody happy. Okay, the total testosterone isn't doing much. It's just hanging there. It's the reservoir. So it has to be converted to free testosterone to work. Well, under certain circumstances, rather than converting to free testosterone and do all the good things that it's supposed to do, it goes sideways into estradiol, which is a form of estrogen. And then men have the experience of not enough testosterone, even though their total's fine, because it's converting into estrogen. And estrogen in men, we really don't want much of that. It's really not good for them. And it can do things like cause weight gain, can cause hot flashes. It can cause breast growth. It can cause sagginess, you know. And it becomes a vicious cycle, because the more estrogen you have, the more fat cells you have. And fat cells do two things. They both make estrogen, and they also make something called aromatase inhibitors. And I know they make, they make the aromatase enzyme, and it is the aromatase enzyme that converts your testosterone into your estrogen. So the more aromatase enzyme you have, the more problems you are going to have. And so you may need to take herbs that inhibit aromatase. These are called aromatase inhibitors. So men who are overweight are going to have more problems with estrogen and are more likely to have lower testosterone. So it's really useful to help these men lose weight. But you see, we get into a little, this is where everything connects with everything else, okay? So I'm about to get a little complicated here. Low testosterone will lead to metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is weight gain, insulin resistance, so which is connected to the weight gain, because the higher your insulin goes, the more fat you might be creating. But insulin resistance is going to lead to my mind. When anybody know the rest of that sentence? Oh, insulin resistance is going to lead to higher glucose levels, i.e. type 2 diabetes. And hi, Mitchell, welcome. We're talking about testosterone. And so if you have anything to add to this, I'm always open to input from our community. So with metabolic syndrome, then you're going to end up with less testosterone, and it's going to be this vicious downward spiral. So it's something that needs to be addressed. And I've definitely had male clients who have craved addictive substances, stimulants for energy, because their testosterone is low, either because their total testosterone is low or it's just not converting effectively into free testosterone. For reasons that I have not been informed, whether or not other people know this or not, I don't know. There is a correlation between low testosterone levels in men and long-term opioid or opiate use. And so a lot of men who either have chronic pain and so have been on a long-term opiate or opioid to manage the chronic pain. And even if they haven't become, it hasn't become an addictive problem for them, it is still likely to lower their testosterone levels. And so the doctor and the patient needs to keep an eye on that. But a lot of our male clients with opioid use disorder, whether it be heroin or whatever, or they've been maintained on methadone or Suboxone, also frequently have a correlation of low testosterone. And we need to keep an eye on that. And, a lot of them have ended up going to the bodybuilding, vitamin stores to be put on testosterone supporting herbs. And that's not necessarily a bad idea. Okay. But it's something that when we're working with men with opioid use disorder, we need to keep that in the back of our minds and make sure that they're keeping an eye on their testosterone levels. Elena.
I'm really appreciating this because I don't know enough about the male thing. I just know more about the women. But man boobs, etc. If a man goes typically and gets their testosterone tested, does the typical test only test the total and not the free testosterone?
It really depends on how savvy the doctor is. GPs tend to be less savvy. And, your more savvy doctor, your endocrinologist is certainly going to be much more likely to look at the whole picture. Your GP is less likely to look at the whole picture. And that's where we come in educating our clients to go back to their doctor and say, hey, can I have a fuller, test here, please? Because I'm having all these symptoms and my nutritionist is suggesting to me that, I may possibly have an issue here. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Christina, have you experienced where heavy marijuana users in men, because I've run across several that were heavy marijuana users throughout their life and have tried to stop. Whoops. What happened?
Okay.
Okay, sorry. I clicked the button. And they have low testosterone. Have you heard of that at all?
I have absolutely heard of the correlation between heavy marijuana use and low sperm count. And sperm that are basically drunk out of their minds. Okay. And so they're just not doing what they're supposed to do and they're not getting to where they're supposed to go. And this is one of the reasons why heavy marijuana use is a cause of male infertility, because you've got dysfunctional sperm. So I'm assuming that there is a correlation between heavy marijuana use and testosterone production because of that, but I haven't actually read about it. Does anybody else know anything about that? So that would certainly be worth pursuing, but it absolutely impacts sperm production, sperm motility, and therefore fertility. Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing I want to mention just briefly before we go on to women is steroid abuse. So steroid abuse is again something, until my attention was brought to it, it wasn't something on the top of my mind. I don't think about steroid abuse. Okay. I can think about other things, but that one's just been out of my sphere of awareness because I don't hang out at gyms. I don't hang out around people who are likely to be abusing steroids. But there's a number of communities where this is a major issue. Men in prison who are into weightlifting, and especially those who've come out of prison, and it's a big deal. Of course, weightlifters, bodybuilders can get trapped by it. People who need to maintain strong muscles for work can get trapped by it. And then men who have an actual body dysmorphia disorder. You know, we hear of body dysmorphia in women where, you know, women either feel like they're way too thin or they're most often way too fat. And with anorexia nervosa, which is a severe eating disorder, it is driven by body dysmorphia, where women, and actually not just dysmorphia, but body dysperception, where when they look in the mirror, they see fat when actually they're thin. Well, there are men who look in the mirror and see thin and flabby when they actually do have real muscle. And so there is this body dysmorphia, this body dysperception that can lead to steroid dependence and steroid addiction. And it actually can meet all of the criteria of any other addictive disorder. You know, it becoming the center of the life, going through, you know, your addictive stages, tolerance, withdrawal, denial, you know, all of the DSM-3 criteria for diagnosing an addictive disorder can apply to steroid addiction. And it can have some very, very, very serious impact on men's health and on their relationships, their families, because when male steroid levels, the androgen levels get too high, there can be issues with anger control and violence and irritability and depression and anxiety and insomnia and. Okay. So it's just something to be aware of. Now, women, coming back to estrogen dominance, don't want to spend too much more time there. We sort of have an idea of it. Now, I really want to talk about the times in a woman's life that are the highest risk time for addictive behavior. So the first is PMS, the 10 days prior to a woman's bleeding. And most of you know this, I just want to remind you again that near the end of a woman's cycle, as estrogen and progesterone drop back to baseline, serotonin drops as well. And actually GABA drops too, because as progesterone drops, GABA drops. And that can cause anxiety, agitation, and insomnia. But I think even more significantly, as estrogen drops, serotonin drops. And that leads to all of those low serotonin symptoms, which are so similar to both PMS and hypoglycemia, which is very interesting because as estrogen and serotonin drop near the end of the cycle, blood sugar becomes even more dysregulated. So if there is no hypoglycemia, reactive hypoglycemia present before, it might actually kick up. And if it was there present before, it's liable to get worse. This is why we recommend that women eat protein every 3 hours as opposed to every 4 hours premenstrually. Why we also recommend trialing with 5-HTP and or tryptophan, or increasing the dose. This is where using the chart's very useful, because a woman's chart, the first to 3 weeks of the month, can look very different from her chart the last week of the month. And so I had a female client who had been through several treatment programs and was going to a couple meetings a day, and was still finding herself getting drunk periodically. And so she was referred to me, and she said, well, periodically. I said, well, okay, what does that mean? How often? She says, I don't know, maybe once a month. Like, And it didn't take us long to figure out that she was every month getting drunk the night before her bleeding started. Not 2 days before, not the day after, but the night before. Well, that was amazing information, because that gave her power. Now because she had, fortunately, a very regular cycle, so she knew exactly when the day before her bleeding was. She could mark it on her calendar. She could bring in extra protection. She could make sure she wasn't alone that night. She could make sure her blood sugar was stable. She could make sure she was using extra 5-HTP. And for the first time in forever, she was able to stay sober. So what this means is that when we have female clients who are trying to recover from an addictive disorder, one of the very first things we do is we track their cycles. One of the very first things we do is we see if there's any correlation between their cravings, their slips, and their relapses and PMS. Okay, this is not 100%, but it's pretty high up there. And so we really need to be bringing that into our treatment process very, very, very early on. And if somebody's in residential treatment, that's the place to start figuring this out. Okay. Menopause. Menopause has been identified as the time in a woman's life where she is at highest risk for a mental health disorder, either starting one when there hasn't been one there before, or it getting worse, or relapsing into one. And the same thing with addictive disorders. It will either be the first time in a woman's life that she develops an addictive disorder, or she relapses into it, or it gets worse. And therefore, with older women, and not so older women, right? It's really important to be asking about their relationship with menopause. And you can't assume that just because a woman's younger, it doesn't mean that she's not in menopause. Addiction counselors tend not to ask their female clients either about PMS or menopause. Okay. Other integrative health professionals do it all the time. but psychotherapists don't, and addiction counselors don't. And we need to be, because it absolutely matters. I think some of you know my story about the my client in her upper 50s who was a well, she wasn't a chronic relapser, she just couldn't get sober, period. And she was in treatment, but she'd also been arrested in the past 2 years 3 times for shoplifting. Now, it's very interesting because there's studies out of England that show that premenstrually women are more often arrested for shoplifting. I don't know if there are studies about menopause and shoplifting in women, but this woman had been her whole life dabbling in shoplifting and had alcohol use disorder, but it wasn't disabling her life until menopause hit. And she started getting drunk more often. She got a DUI. She got a domestic violence charge behind being drunk. And she got arrested 3 times for shoplifting, all within 2 years of stopping bleeding. Right? Now, she thought it was because her father had died 4 years earlier, but none of these symptoms had really gotten out of control until her bleeding, her period stopped. None of her previous clinicians had inquired after this or had picked it up. I picked it up, 20 minutes into the intake. And so I asked her if she had had her hormones checked recently. And she told me she'd gone to Kaiser the year before and they did hormone testing, and yeah, things were really out of whack and they wanted to put her on hormone replacement therapy, but she really didn't like that idea very much and she didn't really like her doctor very much, and so she never went back. Happens all the time. So I let her know that if she was going to work with me, that she had a choice. She either went back to Kaiser or she went to see a friend of mine who was a nurse practitioner, integrative nurse practitioner specializing in female hormones. And so she chose my friend, and it turned out that, yeah, everything was way out of whack, but so was her vitamin D, and so was her thyroid. And so the nurse practitioner kind of got everything in place and got her on some bioidenticals, but she didn't need a lot of bioidentical hormones because once she got her destabilized, once she got her thyroid stabilized, we were working on her liver, we were doing everything, that we've been talking about earlier in this session. Everything started falling into place. And of course, I was working with the amino acids and the diet and the therapy, and she was very compliant because she was very scared because she was really about to be thrown in jail for her 3rd shoplifting charge. She was a high school teacher, and that would have meant she'd lose her teaching license. She was terrified. We needed to throw a lot of 5-HTP at her because she was just ruminating so badly. But the nurse and I really talked about this, and we're very clear that what had happened was the result of a medical condition that her test results proved. And so we each wrote a letter to her lawyer and to the judges involved, explaining the medical piece of this and asking them to please take that into account, letting them know that she was compliant, that she was following treatment, that she was doing beautifully, and that she hadn't had any more incidences. That was a big one. But she didn't have any more incidences because we were taking care of the underlying drivers. And so they gave her community service and probation rather than throwing her in jail.
Yay. Awesome, Christina. You're a superhero. I've been in the system for DUIs and they don't usually listen very much about things like this. So good for you. That's amazing.
No. And if it had just been me, they probably wouldn't have listened. But because I had the nurse practitioner in place who included the sort of test scores, the outer range test scores, and what that meant in terms of behavior and brain chemistry, they listened. So this is, thanks, Mitch. This is another reason why we want to be partnering with people in our community. We don't want to be doing it just by ourselves. We want to have a number of practitioners who we can reach out to. So, questions, comments, stories. I could go on and on and on, but you know, that's why you're in my courses. Don't want to give away all of my secrets.
So Christina, if you could prioritize things like vitamin D and thyroid and hormones, and do you have it kind of in your mind where to start when you're looking at these things that we've talked about today on their lab results?
Well, a general lab, you know, your sort of annual checkup for those of us who do them, and I don't. But those of our clients who do, and I actually will ask my clients to go get one if they haven't. Because while some of the markers I don't really care about, others I very much care about. And then I ask them to ask for a few other things as well, like zinc and copper and vitamin D. And I'll look at the TSH. And if I think there's an issue with thyroid, then I'll ask them to ask their practitioner for a full thyroid panel. It's kind of hard, Laura, because what I like to do is sort of cast my net out there and see what I catch. Once you become more familiar with things, you know, you will begin to catch on to symptom clusters, symptom patterns, and you'll say, oh, there's a pattern here. Let me dig deeper. Yeah. But you have to keep an open mind, you know, an inquirer's mind, a beginner's mind. And even if you think you know what the problem is, be humble and keep your mind open and listen to your clients and trust what they tell you. Because even if what they tell you does not fit into your preconceived ideas, they're probably right, and you have to shift your ideas. Humility, humility, humility. All right.
Christine, it's Kathy. Let me turn my video back on. Y'all didn't need to watch me fold my laundry. So I don't know if you recall that a lady that you and I had texted with, that a shoplifter that I had met in one of the recovery. But you know, this woman goes through such mental struggle in jail and like court, and she's like, but I can't afford all these tests. I'm like, how can you not afford all these tests? How, you've got court fees and this and that and the struggle, and, time is money. And she just, and she's never come back as far as, I put
That's
it out
sad.
there, but it is. And I think, and this is, I think as clinicians, we struggle with these people all the time. Like, you give them a tidbit of information, and for us, we're like, how can you not pursue it?
Right.
How can you not go down that rabbit hole when there's a possibility of an answer and freedom at the bottom of it? But for some people, whether it's the universe, the timing, their awareness, or their willingness, whatever it might be, that barrier is, that's just, you just can't see it. That's the hardest thing to overcome as a clinician is the buy-in, I think, sometimes.
Right. And that's where we have to watch our own codependency.
Mm-hmm.
When we want to start shaking and strangling our
Yeah.
clients, okay. That's where our own codependency has gotten triggered. And we want to work harder than they do.
Yeah.
And what has helped me in letting go is really buying the concept, internalizing the concept that we all have our own journey.
Yeah.
We all have our own journey, and we all have our own timing. And all I can do, you can, what is it? You invite the horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Right.
All we can do is offer and share stories, but we can't cross over into their side of the street. That's not our business. And because we are doing this because we care about people, right? It's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to get upset. It's easy to feel really torn up, because when you see somebody making choices that are not being useful to them, it hurts because we care. And that's where you just need to be working on your own internal boundaries. Take phenylalanine if you need to, if you're carrying a little too much. Work on your codependency and work on allowing them their journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And then along with that,
And get support.
Right. And we have to also be careful that we get, what's the word I'm looking for? The green light from a client to even, provide information. What's it
That's
called?
right.
What's the word? I'm having difficulty with my word
Permission.
finding. I get permission. Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yeah, I ask people, hey, is it okay if we talk about this?
Yeah.
And they'll say yes or no, or they may say, look, I have too much on my plate. I know I should go down that road and I can't. And it's really nice when people have the wherewithal that they can actually put that into words. And then you just have to respect that. And then you say, look, I get that, maybe there's some amino acids that can help with your overwhelm, or when you're ready, I'm here.
So is shoplifting a dopamine deficiency? Is that kind of like gambling, risk taking, or is it, you said 5-8, more like serotonin, but I guess I don't know much about that.
So people do different things for different reasons. Okay, so I think very often it's where you're firing both the endorphins and your catecholamines at the same time. It's going to fit into both of those categories. And again, this is where you ask them, what do you get out of it? What do you do it for? What do you feel afterwards? And then sort of from the feeling words they give you, you can begin to put together, and from the chart, you can begin to put together what's actually going on biochemically.
Christina, you mentioned aromatase. I think that's the first I've heard of that. What is aromatase inhibitor? Aromatase inhibitor?
Aromatase is an enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen.
Okay,
it's
and our body
also-
makes that naturally?
It's
Um,
also involved in women with some of the estrogen conversion, but I'm not so familiar with any of that.
Do you know how to spell that? I
Yeah,
don't know.
just like aroma,
Okay,
and then add TASE to it.
okay, that's how I spelled it. Thank
And of course, anything that ends in an ASE is an enzyme.
And how would you know if, say, a man would need that supplement? Like, how would you know that the testosterone is being converted?
Well, bottom line is you need to test for it. Okay, you need
For
to
the
do,
test, for
you
the,
need to do a total testosterone, a free testosterone, and a estradiol.
okay,
And then there's a number of other tests that can be useful in that whole picture. We go into this in a lot of depth in the advanced class.
right. And would you suggest, because I've heard that the blood hormone test can be so inaccurate and volatile as they change with every heartbeat versus saliva versus a Dutch.
Okay, so yes, there was that lovely question about testing. And the more I jump into the testing world, the more confused I get. And the more everybody seems to say, we don't know what what is going on. So what you do is you hold tests lightly, but you still do them because, you need something, but you also look at symptoms. So it's the symptoms in a man that's going to make you think that you need to do this testing.
Right.
Signs of low testosterone, signs of high estrogen, then you're going to want to do testing. So the Dutch test, which is a dried urine test, they're saying are more accurate than either your blood or your saliva or your whatever. Depending on who you talk to, they're of course going to tell you that their test is best. I'm leaning towards the Dutch people at the moment, but I've gotten good results from just doing the test from Diagnostics company in Washington State. I like it. They have a 4-point cortisol. They have a perimenopausal panel, a postmenopausal panel for women. They've got a male panel. And so far, when I've done tests, it has correlated with symptoms. And it's given me some useful direction.
And which lab was that?
That's Diagnos, DIAGNOS TECH.
Okay. I too have heard, I personally have done nothing but the saliva, but I know a lot of people that prefer the Dutch as well over the saliva. Is the one that you're talking about from Diagnostics, is that saliva?
That's saliva, yeah.
It is saliva. And I was going to ask one more question about the testing. In one brain cell and out the other. So.
Well, and ideally you want to do a couple of them. When you're having hormone issues and you start addressing it, you do your beginning one, then you want to do a follow-up one, maybe 3 to 6 months later. And then another one, maybe 6 months later, just to see, you want to use the same lab. Okay, because if you use different labs, you just can't correlate them. So
Right.
you really actually need, whatever lab you start with is the lab you want to continue with.
And what about, since we're on the topic of labs, and I'm sure that you've addressed this before, but I've been reading a little bit more on it lately. Neurotransmitter testing, yay or nay, as far as accuracy, or like you said, I understand hold the test loosely, but do you think there's validity to a neurotransmitter test? Doctor's data in particular?
It depends what you're using it for. Okay, so for instance, the neurotransmitter metabolite data that comes out of an organic acids test, it's fairly useful. It's telling you, and all of these urinary neurotransmitter tests are telling you what's happening in the immune system and the digestive tract in the body as a whole. What we don't know is to what degree that's reflecting what's happening in the brain. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So some of the things I've read say, well, yeah, you use the urinary neurotransmitter test and you correlate it to itself. So whatever it says at the beginning, once you bring in the amino acids, then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you see what's changing in itself. And I guess that can be useful. The neurotransmitter symptom chart is so accurate that it's more useful, I think, than the neurotransmitter test, because what we're really trying to do is address symptoms. And when I talk to clinicians who swear by the neurotransmitter urinary test, when you really push them, they say, well, yeah, I don't interpret the test by itself. I go by symptoms. And it's like, well, if you're going by symptoms, then let's go by symptoms. Because a lot of people can't afford the test. And if I'm going to be putting money into a test, that may not be the most useful test I want to put my client's money into, because I have the amino acid therapy chart, because I know what the symptoms of neurotransmitter depletion look like. And
So
80% of the time.
the question came up because a caregiver of one of my physical therapy patients who's in recovery, and he's just 90 days. So he's in early recovery. And when he went out hard. He had some recovery and then went out pretty hard and spiraled out. He had 90 days and was really just feeling, couldn't get out of the bed, couldn't get his mindset right. Anyways, he was working with a pharmacist, a friend of mine, who is the daughter of the client that they take care of, Parkinson's patient that I work with. And he, in his test, I had him do the amino acids chart before he got the results from his neurotransmitter tests. And he was high on every single one, which I figured he was. And started him on a protocol, which he was on board with the whole thing. The pharmacist reviewed it and she's like, yep, I agree with everything. He did take Prozac. So, and his serotonin marks were still super low. So I said, just take the 5-HTP at night. He took his Prozac in the morning. And well, he gets the neurotransmitter test back and his serotonin is like off the charts high. And this is someone that I think should be tested with pyroluria. He's got horrific social anxiety. So zinc and even without testing, zinc and B6 was definitely part of the protocol that I gave him. But so in that case, 5-HTP on top of, given if that was accurate, that serotonin was already so high that we could have made it even worse for him if he hadn't had that done. Or is it not accurate?
Was he responding to the 5-HTP in the morning?
He wasn't taking it in the morning because I knew he was taking
At
Prozac.
night. Was he responding to the 5-HTP at night?
who knows? He was taking the GABA, the 5-HTP, the DLPA in the morning, but he took the GABA, the 5-HTP, L-theanine at night. You know, and he was taking all, and he did the next morning, he said that he was feeling better overall. But I'm wondering if, because then a couple of days later, he was starting a new job and he could barely get out the door because his anxiety was so high. You know, so I was just wondering if that one piece is could be what's holding him back.
Here's the problem is you don't know.
Right. But what I'm saying is if we didn't have that piece of neurotransmitter testing, we'd be driving the 5-HTP and maybe saying, well, take more to a certain level.
But at some point, the symptoms are going to tell you that you're getting into trouble.
Okay.
Okay. Because just because the metabolites are high coming out of the urine does not, again, necessarily affect what's happening in the brain. It's going to be higher because you've got increased activity due to the Prozac. So that's going to be driving your metabolites higher anyway.
And so that doesn't necessarily mean that the serotonin is being
utilized
taken up properly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Even though it's got a lot running around, it's just like in the intestines. If you got gut health issue, you could still be peeing out the metabolites, but not actually being utilized.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's the problem.
Gotcha. And is that the same true for the oats test? Because that's also urinary metabolites, the same.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that insight.
Yeah. And so you carefully feel your way. And you may have them pull the 5-HTP for a week and see what gets better and what gets worse. Or you may have them take it right before a job interview.
Right. Unfortunately, the consistency at this point is probably running low on all of his supplements, and the likelihood of him buying another round because he has no money is probably pretty low because he can't get a job. Yeah.
So he really needs to be doing this with food.
Really needs to do his food. He's not shopping for himself yet because I think he just got on the food stamps.
Oh, poor guy.
And I spotted him money for all this initial supplements, and he's paying me a little bit at a time because I've known him for several years, and it breaks my heart that he struggles so much. But that's the empath in me. I'll go broke. I'm trying to help people.
I know the feeling. Feeling.
All right, I'll pray.
Yeah, I do. And I want to remind everybody that on the Eating Protein Saves Lives.org website, we have a resource library now where if you donate as little as $2, you can get access to it, either donating through there or donating through our GoFundMe page. And we have resources now from both Chris Ingen as well as Kelly Miller that are amazing. They were so generous in donating some of their materials, some beautiful ebooks, some beautiful handouts on how to help clients get protein into their diets more effectively. Some, recipes, some charts, just amazing resources. So please do encourage your clients to, donate just a little bit. We figure anybody can afford $2. And make use of these useful resources from our community.
Great.
Because I'm really trying to raise the money to get this information out into the world in a huge way. So. All right. And those of you who have contributed, thank you so much. Jeff, you got access to the resource library finally, right?
I did, yeah, and
You like it?
it is phenomenal.
Yeah,
And
it's-
it is so useful in working with clients in a treatment center, early stage recovery, and yeah,
Yeah,
I so appreciate all of that.
good.
And you're stepping forward and doing this big, huge campaign to put it out in the world. That's huge, Christina. Thank you.
I'm trying. With the help of all of you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, anything else before we end?
Just, I know I heard of it, but somehow I dropped that ball. Where do we donate and sign up for that? Is it on our website, or where is it?
www.eatingproteinsaveslives.org.
Thanks.
And the place to donate to get access to the resource library is at the bottom of the page. We're going to have to make it bigger because I actually spent some time looking for it and couldn't find it. So it's like, okay, this isn't visible enough, you know, or you can just donate straight through the GoFundMe page. So it's GoFundMe, Eating Protein Saves Lives. All right. Bye,
Hi,
everyone.
Christina. Oh, hi. Is there any date projected maybe for that 2-day class or not yet?
Not yet.
Sure, no problem.
Because, you know, the core training is starting again in February.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're now coming up to the holidays. So it was sort of a one shot. We were hoping it would fly right now, but this was our only window. Right. And then you got the holidays, and then you got level, you know, it's starting again in the beginning of February. So we will probably do that 2-day intensive, which is just all the content in level 1 without the coaching, again in probably April. Yeah, April or May.
All right, good to be here. Thanks.
Good to have you here, Sherry.
Thank you, Christina. We love you.
Love you all.
Awesome to be here.
Talk to
Bye.
you later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
No.